Rodney, Alabama 59, Ole Miss 31. Clearly the offense was a juggernaut. Tua Tagovailoa gets those 6 touchdown passes that he'd been close to. Devontae Smith, 11 catches for 274 yards and 5 touchdown receptions. Both of those are records. Alabama rolled. On the flip side, and we played Nick Saban in the last segment, so I had the benefit of hearing him again before I get to you. Coach Saban is a perfectionist. He is always looking at what you can do better. And I think based on what he said Sunday, there's a lot of areas this team can improve in. He was asked about the kicking game, special team strengths. He quickly cut the guy off, the reporter, and said, yeah, we muffed a punt too, which led to 7 points. Defensively, they played 88 plays. They gave up 476 yards, 31 points. So there's a lot to work on going into the bye week. The good news is Alabama's 5-0, ranked number 1 again in both polls. So there's a lot of positive, but there's a lot of things to continue to work on with this team for it to get better and be at its best down the stretch, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think defensively, that's the one thing that probably sticks out to most people. I know that's the biggest area of discussion on TighterInsider.com and a lot of other places is, giving up 31 points, giving up all those yards, a true freshman quarterback playing, making his first start. John Rice Plumlee did a great job. And but there are a lot of areas on that side of the ball, Gary. Obviously, you've lost a lot of players, but I think, too, it's just the inexperience that they've got to continue to develop these guys fundamentally. As a defense that's got to improve in those fundamental areas. Nick Saban pointed out a lot of things, playing better on the perimeter, playing gap control up front better and correctly. Those types of things, missing tackles, all of those things can certainly help you. We saw Saturday lost containment many times on the quarterback. So, again, I think all of those things you talked about the week off, certainly will have an opportunity to improve in those areas.
Scott Moore said earlier he thought, playing these last 4 games in the heat of the day, defense playing a lot of plays wears on them, and normally you don't get but 1 bye week. This week this year you get 2, and the first this week. I kind of agree with him. I think this bye week's coming at a good time for this team. I think they're a little fatigued. Do you agree with that, Rodney?
Well, they may be. Certainly the heat could be a factor. I don't. I'm not going to buy into the heat Saturday and some of the fundamental things that we've seen throughout the season that they've had issues with. I think there clearly are issues fundamentally, that they're not performing, they're not playing technique-wise, doing the things that they're taught to do. And again, I think a lot of that goes back to the inexperience, Gary, the youth. They've got to learn what they're supposed to do, and as Nick Saban says, how they're supposed to do it and why it's important to do it that way every single play. And I think that's the key. It's just fundamentally they've got to improve on the defensive side of the ball.
When you look at this schedule, they've rolled through these first 5 games. You do have A&M coming up after the bye, but then Tennessee and Arkansas, another bye. They still have to go to Mississippi State, and they play Western Carolina. I mean, I look at the schedule, and honestly, I don't see but 2 teams that have a chance to win against Alabama, and that's LSU and Auburn. I mean, I just think it's a 2-game schedule. Now, having said that, I think those are both really good football teams. You agree with that, or am I just dumbing this thing down? I know every time you play, you have a chance to lose, but I don't see anybody else on the schedule with a chance to win against Alabama other than LSU and Arkansas.
Well, I think certainly that's probably the most reasonable way to look at it. If you wanted to say those 2 teams are in terms of talent, the ability to match up with Alabama, certainly you would see those 2 teams, LSU and Auburn, as the most difficult on the remaining schedule. But also I think, too, and I don't know, again, I just, when you're talking about Texas A&M, they're going to have an off week. I think Jimbo Fisher's a good coach. I think Texas A&M will be ready to play when Alabama goes to College Station. Do I think Alabama will win the game? Yeah, I do. But I don't think that Texas A&M's a rollover. I mean, I think Jimbo Fisher will have his team prepared. It's a great atmosphere out there. They certainly have some weaknesses. I mean, their offensive line has struggled. They barely beat Arkansas, a team that's not very good, to be honest, this past week. But I do think it's a positive. They found a way to win that game, have some momentum going into the off week. So, I'm always leery when you go on the road in the SEC against a team that has some talent, and they certainly do.
Saban was Saturday. He's always educational, but I think again he pointed out all the things that he didn't feel good about, and he felt good about winning the game clearly, but he said something too about the defense playing so many plays, and as you said, part of that's on the defense. Ole Miss converted 8 third downs. You got to get off the field. I thought, though, at the end of the game was a perfect example of what he's talking about. You've got the second-team offense in there. He goes for it on 4th and 4. They run a play. Mac Jones hits John Mechie right in the numbers. Okay? I understand he's a freshman, but this is the SEC. You catch that ball, you end the game. Ole Miss doesn't get it back. Their third-team quarterback, Grant Tisno, doesn't come in and torch you 2 for 2 for 56 yards. They don't go 75 yards. I think that frustrated Saban. They get 75 yards more of offense. They get another touchdown, and it could have been prevented if the offense executed. Second team or not, they practice too. And I know I said that to you in the press box, and I'm probably a little harsh at times. But, those are kind of plays that you got to make when you're trying to protect your defense and you're trying to get the game over with. He's got to catch that football, period. End of story.
Well, yeah, you do, and that certainly did pad some statistics for them. But I would say this too. Think about this: you go up 7-0, you get a 3 and out, and then you fumble the punt or
huge play.
The punt.
Yeah,
and not only that, it's a touchdown, but they bring it back, and Ole Miss gets to run plays, and your defense that would produce a 3 and out has to go back on the field. So. I think right there you had an opportunity to go up 14-0 with that possession for Alabama. So, there's a lot of things that happened. There was a couple of times, and I think Alabama got caught with the legal substitution defensively when on a 3rd and 5 that gave Ole Miss a first down. New life. Those types of things continue to hurt this defense. So I think it's you look at it as a whole. There's a lot of things there that allowed Ole Miss to run more plays, and I think those are the types of things that we saw also in the South Carolina game. You remember Alabama had a good defensive stop. Surtain gets an interception, and you had 12 men running around on the field. So I think that those are the things that they've got to get ironed out.
Yeah, and I think that's what Saban's pressing on is just, getting this team to be as good as it can be. I think if that's the case, I think they're going to win the national championship. Alabama moves to number 1 in the 2 major polls, coaches and AP. Now that's every year since 2008 they've been ranked number 1 in the regular season. I think Miami's second with 7 straight years. Noteworthy to you? Does it matter? Is it? I think it's important. I'd rather be number 1 than number 2 myself. And I think that when it comes playoff selection time, they don't go based off the polls. But I think there's a much better chance of you getting the number 1 seed if you're ranked number 1 in both polls than rather being ranked 2, 3, or 4.
Well, I think the thing noteworthy about it is it keeps that string alive anyway. I think that's something that you always look at. And it's just, you remember back in the day, of course, this has been a while back, when we used to look at it and say, how many 10-win seasons has Alabama had? That used to be something that was big when you played 11 games. So you used to look at those things, and I think this is another one of those kind of marks that you'll always remember. It's pretty phenomenal. Will anyone ever come close to that, break that? So, but as far as this team's concerned, this number 1 ranking to me is really means very little right now. It's not. I think you've got a group of teams, and I posted this yesterday on TighterInsider.com, Gary, that this might be a year, might be. We'll see how it plays out. We're only 5 weeks in, but this might be a year when an 18 playoff might be something that would be good because there looks to be several teams right now that are just all in the mix. Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Ohio State, Oklahoma. Probably name 7 right there. And there's probably another 1 or 2 that all look like they're teams that could be worthy of being playoff teams. As you judge them against each other. So, or all the competition, but So I really, this number one thing, it's fine and dandy, but this Alabama team, to me, on that defensive side of the ball, and you mentioned the kicking game, it just has a ways to go, and I think they've got to improve over the course of the season to get where they want to be.
And they can. Again, I think this team's got a high ceiling. I want to ask you this, and then I'm going to move on to a different topic. Were you surprised that Christian Barmore didn't play in the game based on the way he had played late against South Carolina and late against Southern Miss?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because I thought, he would probably get in later in the game because he had been getting in. He obviously got in against South Carolina and then against Southern Miss the week before this game here with Ole Miss. But, at the same time, I think that Nick Saban has said that, we've got to have guys that are doing the right things. And that was when he was asked about Barmore. You don't slant left when you're supposed to slant right, whatever. So I think that's the thing he's trying to get into these young players' heads is what we talked about earlier, Gary. It's killing them when they're not playing their gaps correctly up front. And people say, oh, that true freshman linebacker Christian Harris or that true freshman Shane Lee kind of screwed that play up. Well, maybe it wasn't really their fault to begin with. I mean, the guys up front, if they don't do what they're supposed to do properly, kind of puts those guys in a bad situation. So I think, and again, I think I'm not saying that is why Barmore didn't play Saturday, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the reason. We got to do things the right way.
All right. Saturday before the game, the 79 national championship team was honored, 40th anniversary. Noteworthy for a lot of reasons. It was Coach Bryant's sixth and final national championship. And I know he had some great teams in the early 60s, but this was 1979, Rodney. And by 1979, people scored points. It was, modern era college football. You had a lot of fast athletes. This team ran the table, and we've seen how hard that is to do under Coach Saban and under Coach Bryant. It's hard to win them all. What's remarkable to me is in 1979, this team gave up 67 points in 12 games. They had 5 shutouts that season. Really was dominant. Tennessee gave them a scare. Auburn gave them a little bit of a scare, but they handled Arkansas with ease in the national championship game. And I know you and I, that's one of our favorite teams. And to see those guys, it just brought back some really fond memories. That was a great, great football team.
Yep. And you said 67 points, which is correct.
For 12 games.
58 points in the regular season.
Right.
Think about that. Pretty amazing. You know how they scored their first touchdown?
Hang on, let me think. It would have been against Georgia Tech. It probably was a defensive touchdown on special teams or something.
E.J. Jr. had, a 59-yard interception return for a touchdown. So it started with defense on that team. And Stedman Shealy, obviously, his first year as a starter, his senior year, 12-0, did a great job orchestrating that offense. He had, one game against Mississippi State that year. He ran for, I think, 190 yards. Mm-hmm. I think that stood for a record for a while. I'm not sure if it still is the quarterback rushing record. I can't remember. Someone's broken that. But, yeah, they fell behind at Tennessee. Actually, it was at Legion Field, 17-0 to Tennessee, and came back and won that game. What was it, 24-7?
27-17, yeah.
27-17. Yeah. And so that game, the LSU game, where they played in a rainstorm down there and beat LSU 3-0.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a game that certainly stood out, and then they fell behind Auburn 18-17 and had to have that great drive, and Stedman Shealy scored, and they went ahead 25-18. And and also the thing that I remember about that Auburn game was I think it was the ensuing kickoff. James Brooks almost took it to the house, and Jeremiah Castillo, who's a true freshman, ran him down and prevented that, and Alabama went on to win that game and set up the opportunity to play Arkansas and win the national championship.
Yeah, it was a special football team. I love that they bring these championship teams back, SEC and national championship teams, and honor them. All right, I'm going to go off topic here a little bit. I just want to get your thoughts. Rutgers fired Chris Ash because he's just not getting it done. And, of course, obviously I think that Greg Schiano is going to be the top choice there. But if that doesn't work out, a couple of of SEC coaches are being mentioned. Butch Jones, offensive analyst at Alabama, and what might even be a better choice for them. This is what I want to ask you about. Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State. I think the guy's a good football coach, but you do wonder about fit, and it just seems, there are a lot of coaches that come south from the north and coach well, and he may very well get the job done there. But I'm getting the sense very quickly in his tenure that it's just not happening with Mississippi State's fan base, and I'm not sure how comfortable he is there. I could see Joe Moorhead at some point trying to get back in that area of the country where he's from to be a head coach, whether it's at Rutgers or somewhere else.
Very possibly. You're right. I never really, not that I didn't think he was a good coach, but I wondered about that fit as well, when they hired him initially. We'll see what happens, but that's one. And listen, I think there's some buzz out there, Gary, behind the scenes of a couple of other coaches in the SEC that would probably surprise you. I won't say anything right now, but there's some things going on in the SEC that some coaches are already kind of checking some other opportunities out and preparing, laying the groundwork in case something doesn't go well. So it could be real interesting offseason. We'll see how the season. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how the season plays out.
All right, we're going over a little bit, but I want to ask you about one more thing. And you know me, I can go on a little bit of I can get fired up. I've kind of been sitting back and again, I understand the rivalry. You do too, Alabama and Auburn. But I've kind of been chuckling over people looking at Bo Nix's stats. Well, he only threw for 100 yards, 50%. I mean, the guy's a winner. I mean, anybody that's watched the kid knows he can play football, all right? I watched him in high school. I did some of his games. The guy's special. And they've been waiting for stats. Well, he gave them to him Saturday night. 16 of 21 for 335, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, rushed 7 times for 56 yards and a touchdown. The guy's good. And that doesn't mean that Alabama's not going to beat Auburn. I'm not saying that. But this Auburn team with this young quarterback, this is a really, really good football team. Now, they've still got to play Florida, Georgia, LSU, and Alabama. So if they win the West, you just have to tip your hat to them with that schedule ahead. But I think Alabama fans have to be preparing themselves for the fact that the Tide's going to have to go down there November 30th against one of these Auburn teams that is going to be really good. That's just the reality, Rod, right?
I would think so. Just watching them, but again, you mentioned those other teams that they have to play. It's going to be certainly interesting to see. And Bo Nix is obviously a winner. I mean, guy's a good player, and true freshman. You knew he was going to get better and better. I mean, that certainly this game here served as a lot of confidence in terms of as he starts to move forward. But really, for them, to me, the difference right now is what Kevin Steele's doing on that defensive side of the ball. They're really good on that side of the ball. They're solid, and I think that right there is the best thing they have going for them right now. And as that offense continues to develop with Bo Nix, it's listen. If somebody doesn't knock them off, they keep gaining momentum. They could be a real juggernaut by the end of the year.
And finally, you got an opportunity to watch Bryce Young some on Friday night for Mater Dei against St. John's in Washington, D.C., and he lit it up, 26 of 37 for 416, and I think, 5 touchdowns. How good is this young man, in your opinion, and what does he have a chance to do on the next level here at Alabama?
Well, I think he's real good. I mean, I think he's everything they've cranked him up to be. He's very smart. Very intelligent. He's a leader. He knows he can throw the ball very accurately, makes good decisions. I think all of those things are extremely important. He's a guy that has the ability to come in and play as a true freshman. Now, I'm not saying he's going to start the USC game next year or, be the starter. I don't know. You have to wait and see how they perform once they get here. But I think he has those tools. I think when you look at him, he has the potential. A good arm. Again, Gary, it's about accuracy, putting the ball in the right spot, and he does that on that level. Now, he plays with a lot of really good players, but also they play against the best competition there is, and traveling across country to play against St. John's. And if you watch that game, the defensive front for St. John's had a guy that's committed to Georgia, a 5-star player. They have a guy committed, a very good-looking defensive lineman, Trey Williams, committed to Clemson, and they had some other really talented players. But, I mean, if you saw it, I mean, he got hit. Bryce Young got hit one time by Trey Williams. It knocked his helmet 5 yards off. I mean, it knocked it off his head. And he was shaken up. But the impressive thing was he got up. Next 3 series, he throws touchdown passes. So I think it's the composure. He never really loses that.
Always entertaining and informative with Rodney Orr, and, of course, TiderInsider.com. I know that, it's intense, it's hot, it's entertaining, and it's available still for just $48 a year.
Right, and Gary late last night posted a Sunday night recruiting little notes package that has some tidbits in there that I think if you read it and you with a fine-tooth comb, you can pick up some really good things. That's just part of what we have there at TiderInsider.com. Also on our forums, as you mentioned, a lot of discussion going on right now about Alabama football and college football in general.
All right. Good to have you, Rodney. Enjoyed it. Thanks.
Take care, buddy.